Friday, Baylor College of Medicine and Friends of Baylor. Well, this past week was my sister's birthday. Janet's birthday. I can't tell you how old. She thinks she's my younger sister. She's my older sister. But I said, whatever you want for your birthday. She said, please do a Q&A. Whatever you do. So that's what we're doing today. Actually, she asked for about 347 other things, which are in process. But this is the quick one for the day. Anyway, I've got a lot of interesting questions. Some of these are from out in left field, but they're from you, so let's start. So, is consumption of raw milk safe? Robert Kennedy has made several statements advocating for the consumption of raw milk and opposing regulations against it. So, is it actually safe? No, it's not safe. We went over all the data for H5N1, bird flu, with all the infected dairy cattle. And of course, this is what Lily's favorite thing is a lot of cats, a lot of farm animal cats were dying from eating and drinking unpasteurized milk from infected cows. And so, we know that there were a lot of cattle farmers or cattle handlers in the dairy industry that got infected. We really don't know what the route of transmission was. We know they were handling milking instruments, so who knows? But no, I wouldn't do that. And there was a sort of similar question. Another person said, the USDA says that commercial milk that's pasteurized is safe for human consumption, but I read a study that shows that the bird flu virus is detectable after pasteurization. Can the latter virus remain and infect us? So can viruses remain in pasteurized milk? So this is, okay, unpasteurized is bad, pasteurized, there's stuff in it still, but there have been studies taking live H5N1 bird flu, putting it in milk and then pasteurizing it. And what you find in that situation is you can't pull out any infectious disease. So you culture the virus post-pasteurization, there's no virus that grows out, but you can do PCR and amplify fragments of the virus, and that's been shown. So those fragments that are there are no longer infectious. So I would say it works. And they did another study. Other studies have looked at taking mice and giving them repeated oral exposures of inactivated H5N1 in mice. So if they take H5N1, pasteurize it, and then give it to mice, it doesn't cause any problem. But if they take just standard or live virus and put it in milk, it can cause lethal infections. So it shows, again, that pasteurization denatures the virus where it's not infectious, even though you might be able to detect some nucleic acid. So pasteurization is very, very effective, as it has been since Louis Pasteur started doing it. So, we're going to change 100 years of, well, never mind. I read an article in the Washington Post about some drug-resistant bacteria that were transmitted in a veterinary facility. I didn't know about this, so this is real interesting for me. Can our pets carry bacteria that can infect us? So I went and looked up this study. The study was based on an article published in the Journal of Clinical Infectious Diseases. And what they found, it was really interesting. The authors point out that drug-resistant E. coli is traditionally thought to be something that happens in hospital-acquired infections. It's emerging kind of in the community. So there was a study from the Massachusetts State Public Health Lab that identified 3 people who had cases of drug-resistant E. coli. And they also received, in the same lab, several samples from a veterinary hospital that also had drug-resistant E. coli. And when they sequenced them, they were pretty much similar, very close to being the same. So when they went and interviewed the 3 people, what they found is they all had pets that had been at this veterinary hospital. So that certainly suggests that the people got infected from the pets who acquired it, as it's sort of similar to a hospital-acquired infection. So it was a veterinary facility, just like an inpatient hospital system. The pets were there, they got infected, and it sounds like that they were actually infected because their pets got infected. And this is sort of typical barriers between people and animals in the wild, and domestic animals, bats, et cetera, are always getting less and less as we go into their territory and they come into our territory. So there's lots of infectious diseases that we're exposed to from animals. And by the way, that's not the only thing. I thought I'd just let you know, like salmonella. Did I used to tell you about your little turtle? Can have salmonella. Dogs and rats and reptiles in captivity have salmonella. There's Campylobacteria that's common in dogs and puppies. You can get leptospirosis from dogs that are infected from cattle on farms. MRSA is found in many animals, besides people, in animals including dogs. Brucellosis is in dogs and in unpasteurized milk from cattle. Bartonellosis, which is cat scratch fever, is common in cats, and for people who are scratched by their cats, they get swollen nodes. Pasteurella is one that's common in cat bites. And psittacosis, or parrot fever, is common in some psittacine birds, like parrots and budgies and whatever. So it's not always great to have a pet. You just have to be a little bit careful. Keep your barriers between your pet. Anyway, I'm talking how the dog, my dog, Lily sleeps with me all the time. Anyway, someone asked, I'd mentioned that measles seems to be waning, so someone is measles still present in the U.S.? Well, it's certainly not increasing, but it's not gone. And, with our vaccination rate under 95% in kindergarten kids, we're going to have it around. It just takes, it's worldwide. The only way to prevent outbreaks is through herd immunity. We talked about the R numbers, the highest of any infectious disease, 18, which means 95% of the population has to be vaccinated in order to prevent outbreaks. So we keep having these outbreaks. And so, for example, the CDC reported 30 cases since September 14th. 86% of those are linked to outbreaks. An outbreak is defined by 3 or more cases. And the reason that's important is that only happens when you don't have sufficient vaccination. If you had over 95% vaccination, when there was introduced, there'd only be 1 case. But when there are 3 or more cases, it means that other people were not vaccinated. So to date, there have been 21 cases from international visitors. That's always the danger. You travel internationally or someone comes here. And Minnesota just saw a big surge. They've had 18 cases, 10 more this year than last year. If you look at measles, see, it's gone. This is the weekly measles cases by date of rash onset. And you can see there's still 15 or so a week. And as I said, those two, it's 30 cases since September. We've already exceeded yearly measles cases. We're up to 1,544. The second most was in 2019, 1,274. You can see where it's getting worse and worse. And the vaccination status of those cases, 92% unvaccinated, 4% undervaccinated, just 1 dose. So 96% are either under or unvaccinated. So this is completely preventable. 12% of those measles cases have been hospitalized, so needless hospitalizations, and 3 deaths, also needless. Okay. This is what I didn't know about. Read an article in the Washington Post that in some places in vitro fertilization is automated. Will this improve the success rate? I had no idea. So I went and pulled the article. So 15% of couples have trouble conceiving in the United States, and actually worldwide. And IVF was invented in the 70s. Actually, the inventors of IVF received a Nobel Prize in medicine for its development. The success rate, which used to be very, very rare, is now up to 50% in women under 35, but only about 10% in women over 40. And it remains a highly manual process. So you have to inject women to stimulate ovulation, you have to collect the eggs, you have to collect the sperm from men, and then you combine it in a dish. And it's really interesting. It's fairly manual. You can see there's this pipette over here provides a little suction and holds the egg in place, and there's a glass pipette, and you select the best sperm and you put it in, and it can either be incubated with the egg and spontaneously fertilized, or you can inject it directly. So this particular instrument, it's developed in Mexico, or being utilized in Mexico, collects the sperm, holds the egg, and injects it automatically with a little sort of an AI program. And it's really interesting, but there's absolutely no evidence that it improves the outcome. So there's no evidence that it's more efficient. But obviously a lot of interest in the topic, and so something to keep in mind. All right. So I have a slight correction from the previous week. So when you go to a pharmacist and request a Moderna vaccine, you automatically get the next spike vaccine. So the answer is no. When you request a Moderna vaccine from a pharmacist, you're either going to get the next spike or you're going to get Spikevax, which is the last year's. So the only way you know is if you actually go and ask them, or anticipate and call and ask them. Over the age of 65, it's considered everyone should be getting next spike. It's a lower dose, and it's only to the receptor binding domain. So here's where I made a mistake. It turns out both next spike and Spikevax are to the LP8.1 variant, which was the dominant variant last year. I said last week or 2 weeks ago that I thought it was to the JN1. That's actually the target for Novavax. My next spike and Spikevax, as well as the Pfizer, to the LP8.1. Of course, the dominant strain is XFG, so they're closely related, not as closely related as the JN1 strain, but it's close enough that I'm sure it'll be effective. But you should actually call your pharmacist, make sure it's available, and while the recommendations have been, kind of varied, I would recommend everyone get it, period, rather than worry about what age. But right now, the CDC is recommending 65 and over, and under the age of 65 only if you have like a risk factor. But I would just get it. Can you get a flu vaccine and COVID vaccine at the same time? Yes, it's safe to do it. It saves you a trip. I would certainly do that. Okay, this is another person asked, have there been any reported deaths from West Nile in Texas this year? So I was surprised. I remember early in the season, after the floods in the hill country, I said I thought it was going to be a pretty bad West Nile because of the amount of flooding and standing water. But it hasn't been that bad in Texas. So far, there have been no deaths reported. In 2024, there were 455 cases and 56 deaths, but it really has not been that bad a season. Over the last 5 years, Texas has had 929 cases and 122 deaths. But what's interesting is global warming happens. The mosquitoes are around longer and longer and longer. But you can see this is the mosquito positive pool in Texas. This is previous years. 2024 is the big peak in blue. The orange bars are 2025, and you can see it's much less in the mosquitoes itself, and these are human cases, much less than previous 2 years, and in the mortality is listed as 0. So it's not been that bad a West Nile situation in our state. I also, if you'll recall, I looked at some of the other states, and we still lead in the rest of the country. Okay. Along the mosquito biting thing, I read in Forbes that drinking beer makes people more attractive to mosquitoes. Again, I had no idea. So there was a paper in the Journal of Science that reported a study of 465 people who attended a music festival in the Netherlands. And what they found was that beer drinkers were 44% more attractive to mosquitoes than people who had abstained from beer for 12 hours. So it was a really pretty good study. They used a custom setup where they had a transparent cage, and the person, or the study people would put their arm in the cage, and the other choice was a sugar feeder, and there was a plastic separator so they could only smell the arm or the sugar. They couldn't actually bite. And so they stuck it and looked, and they had a video thing that counted the number of mosquitoes that landed. So, and what they found is if you'd been drinking beer, 44% more increase in mosquitoes. But cannabis users also had 35% more attractive than those who were not smoking cannabis. And of course, this is my favorite, those who had slept with someone the night before were 46% more attractive. Yeah, baby! Now, that was not reported in Forbes, but it was in the paper. And it sort of shows you what was going on in the Netherlands. It's like beer, drinking, cannabis, and sleeping together. All of those increase your chances of getting mosquito bites. Yeah, baby! Now, that's one of the best studies I've seen in a long time. Okay. Now, this is a tough one. I got a grandson that's 2 weeks old, 3 weeks old. It says, is it safe to take a 4-month-old to outdoor festivals or any crowded venue? Well, I wouldn't, but the CDC and the American Pediatric Association say taking a 4-month out to outdoor festivals or crowded venues during the current respiratory season. So right now there's RSV, there's, I mentioned COVID's around, there's a couple of adenoviruses going up, et cetera. So it says it requires careful consideration. That to me means they're telling you don't do it. But anyway, the COVID vaccine is not indicated for babies under 6 months. Remember, they're supposed to get an antibody from their mothers. And after 6 months, the American Pediatric Association, unlike the CDC, is recommending that after 6 months, all the kids get vaccinated with COVID. Also, it's RSV season, so remember the RSV guidelines. This year is recommended if you're pregnant, especially in your last trimester, you vaccinate RSV. That provides antibodies to the baby during that difficult period. If not, it's a new recommendation. There's a monoclonal antibody for your baby to get you through the RSV season. But I wouldn't go to a crowded venue without having a kid that's fully vaccinated, or so. I would say you can do it, but I wouldn't do it. Okay. Has the COVID peak for this year? Has the COVID peak this year already happened? Well, according to the CDC, the biggest peak was in September 6th, and it's starting to come down. If you look at nationally the data, the early indicators were test positivity in emergency rooms and ED visits. They're all coming down. Severity indicators, hospitalization are down, and of course, mortality is always a late indicator. But it looks like the peak is gone down already. And if you look at what's expected for the upcoming respiratory season, as we go into January, the predictions are that, it's going to be kind of a moderate season. This is 23, 24, and they expect hospitalizations to be about the same as those previous years. There's nothing, of course, we're not all that great at predicting, so I don't know what to say about that. Okay, so I'd like to end with TEFI data, just because it's really good data from the Texas Epidemic Public Health Institute. Enterovirus is going up, human adenovirus, SARS-CoV-2 is around. And interestingly enough, I haven't talked about Mpox, but Mpox is going up in Texas. So we might have to talk about Mpox again next week. And one person said, I saw in the news that Jane Goodall died. What were her contributions to science? So she was, as you know, famous primatologist known for her work with chimbees in the Gombe National Park in Tanzania. She was the first to discover that chimpanzees made tools. She started a not-for-profit to understand chimpanzees and primates. My favorite quote of hers of all time is, she liked dogs a lot more than chimps because chimps are too much like humans. She's right about that. They can be nasty. Anyway, I want to end today with a bunch of shout-outs. First of all, shout out to Dr. Kirk Jackson, Assistant Professor of Anesthesiology, who's been appointed the new Assistant Dean of Admissions in the School of Medicine. He is a 20 Baylor graduate, completed his residency at the University of Pennsylvania, and joined the Baylor faculty in 2018. Congratulations to Jennifer Cervantes, Assistant Professor of Pediatrics, who received the 2025 Society for Developmental Behavior Pediatrics Mid-Career Award. Recognizes significant contributions in research, clinical research, teaching, education, advocacy. She is the first social worker to receive that award, so congratulations to her. And also congratulations to Dr. Mensa Bansu, Assistant Professor of Pediatrics, who received the 2025 Richmond Coleman Award from the American Academy of Pediatrics section on development behavior in pediatrics, and it recognized a mid-career individual has made outstanding contributions to the field of developmental and behavioral pediatrics. October is Breast Cancer Month, Awareness Month, and at Baylor we'll all be wearing pink on Friday the 17th to recognize this month. Anyway, enough questions. I can't take any more. I didn't answer them all, but I'll get to them some other time. Have a great weekend. I can't wait to see you next week.